I'd like to welcome everybody to the next episode of the American Cannabis, sponsored by Cannabis Tech. Today we have a special guest, Jenny Hermano, CEO and lead cannabis consultant with ICS Consulting, which is Industry Compliance Solutions. And today we're going to be discussing creating a culture of compliance. Jenny, thank you for coming into the office today. I don't have a lot of folks who come in and share the experience together with me in person, so appreciate you coming in today. If you would, please give us a little background on kind of how you got into the cannabis space and what brought you to creating ICS, and then we can dive into your slideshow here.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for hosting me today. I really appreciate being here and participating in this live webcast. Basically, I was an employee in the cannabis space, and I started in 2009 as a receptionist, and I just kind of wanted to get my foot in the door. I had no idea what I was really even getting myself into, and just from there, I just kind of fell in love with the process, and I was working out here in Colorado back when it was the Wild Wild West, before we even had our enforcement division was even created. So I was able to participate in the transition of going from a not very regulated to a heavy regulated market here in Colorado. And I basically worked in dispensaries for the last 6 years as a manager, and then I worked my way up to where I helped open a adult use recreational store in Denver in 2014. And from there, I knew at that point I did not want to be an employee forever, that I had my eyes set on the goal of being a consultant, but I did not even know what that meant. So I went and worked for 2 consulting companies as an independent contractor, and then after that is when I formed ICS Consulting in late 2015. So I'm going on about 3 years growing my business. I still feel very much in the startup phase, and I'm learning everything as I go, just like the rest of us, and it's just been a really amazing process to be part of this industry.
It is. It's a wild ride, isn't it?
It's a wild ride.
It's too much fun, which is why I think a lot of us stay in it. We have a passion for it, and we stick to it because we really enjoy the work.
Yes.
Well, today on our format for our audience, we're going to go through a slideshow here, so please utilize the Q&A to when we get for the end of this presentation, we can go through all of your questions and see what you may have missed during this. So if we will, we'll start off with your whole presentation here, and we'll save the questions to the end.
Fantastic. Well, the first slide is going to be how to combat complacency. I thought it was a great place to start because I think it's human nature to get complacent, especially in an industry that has a lot of regulation or moving from a non-regulated space into a regulated space. So I thought this was like a really important place to start. So one of the things I was kind of asking myself when preparing for this webcast was, what causes complacency? And a couple of things that I came up with is lack of enforcement of the rules, lack of clarity. So a lot of times there's a lot of misinterpretation of the regulation. Maybe a facility is not utilizing a compliance officer or a lawyer, and employees are just kind of interpreting the rules, or a rule is suspended in a really high gray area where it's really hard. It's not very black and white, and it can be looked at in many different ways. That can also cause complacency. Over-regulation can also cause complacency. Obviously, if you're getting hit with rule changes every 4 to 6 months, it can start to pile up, and people can start to feel overwhelmed. There's over like 600 pages of regulations that a lot of these facility owners and facility managers are faced with on a daily basis, and not everyone can keep up on that, as well as running their business and managing a facility and managing employees. The lack of training with employees, so having no accountability. When there's lack of training in a facility, this definitely creates complacency. I believe employees thrive in structure, and when there's not structure, it becomes chaotic, a chaotic environment, and people stop caring. Burned out in the business. I see this a lot in the cannabis space. Some people have put in a decade, or 5 or 6 years, and they start getting burned out. Owners and employees. I see employees getting burned out as well. there's no more passion, and something basically has happened along the way where maybe somebody just might feel broken, or they're just not interested anymore because maybe they're constantly coming up against regulation and they feel like they're always hitting the wall and they're never getting anywhere, and that can cause somebody to give up and become complacent. Not 100% invested in the overall business. So basically, if they don't have enough skin in the game, even as an employee, if I'm just a $12 employee, I might not feel that I have a big investment in the business, and I might not give as much if I was being paid $18 an hour or $20 an hour. The more skin in the game as an employee or even a partner in a business, the more effort and work that they'll put in. And then I wanted to ask myself another question, which is how being complacent can hurt a business. So one of the things that being complacent can cause in your business is basically no employee retention. You become a revolving door in your facility, and you're flying through bud tenders, and you're flying, through trimmers. And a lot of this, the loss of retention happens with low-level employees, and I believe it's because of wage, and the wages aren't high enough, and so there's nothing in it for them to stay when you're making $10 or $12 an hour, as opposed to a manager who might be on a salary base and has a little bit more money and more skin in the game. And my next one is employees stop caring. And this actually affects your customers, because obviously if your employees stop caring, then that's going to affect the customers coming into your business. So a decrease in customers, so lack of sales, is another way that complacency can hurt your business. Also, waiting for the state to come in and tell you what's wrong. I actually meet a lot of people who do this, believe it or not. They don't want to hire someone like me or an outside person, or even hire a full-time compliance officer to work in their facility to help them with these things. They rather wait for their the state authority or whoever's regulating them to come in and tell them what's wrong. And I don't always think that's the best place to start. And I believe you should always be prepared for when anyone's going to come into your facility. Another way being complacent can hurt your business is violations. Violations can definitely hurt your business, because what happens if you get too many violations, you can lose your licenses and then you get shut down. And then basically at the end of the day, you are no longer in business. So I wanted to make a list of, tips on how you can correct complacency in your facility, because like I always like to say, this is a normal human nature, what we're doing here when we're complacent, like I said, because we get overwhelmed, and I think it's just human nature for us to shut down once in a while. So there's ways to get yourself out of being complacent. One is engage 100% in compliance. And I always say recommitting is free. It costs nothing to recommit, and you can recommit every day. Every day you can brush yourself off and jump back on the horse and say, it's a new day. Today is going to be a great day. So there's always a chance to start over. There's always more than a second chance. And, recommitting is not limited to one time only. Second, I say do an internal assessment of your employees. Assess the compliance culture. What's your culture with your employees? Send somebody in that your employees actually don't know they're there to assess your employees. Have them watch your employees and write a report and get back to you, because what I found when I was a director of operations of a dispensary, everybody acted proper when I was there in the building, but when I left, they acted a different way. So you want to know how your employees are acting as an owner when you're not in the facility or when specific managers aren't around, to test them to see what your compliance culture is in that facility. Thirdly, find out truly where you are and what needs to be remediated, which goes to my next point, which is getting a third-party internal audit. You can't fix your issues, you can't fix complacency if you don't have someone expose what's going on in your business. And I think a lot of people do this on a daily basis. People hire business coaches for their business to expose them on what they're not doing correctly and to expose the holes so you can fix that and fill those holes up. So I definitely highly recommend having somebody come in and do a third-party audit so you can expose the areas and where you're lacking, because sometimes it's hard to do that yourself because you might not want to be 100% honest, and having somebody that has nothing invested in your business to come in and tell you the truth, I think is a better approach. The next one is implement structure and accountability with your team. How are you implementing structure with your team? Are you supplying training for employees? Are you educating them and making sure they're knowledgeable in all the rules? Are all the employees getting educated, or are you just training managers? Are you leaving out low-level employees? These are all things to ask yourself. So you want to make sure that your team understands that you're going to hold them accountable. And this is writing employees up. I've worked in a lot of facilities where they didn't have really good HR practices. And I know it's a new industry and we're all starting out, and a lot of these businesses are becoming like real businesses now. Well, implement HR systems and make sure your employees understand what it means to be written up. Your employees want to be held accountable. If you don't hold them accountable, it's just the whole thing's going to run amok, and that's eventually going to hurt your business. Also, invest in compliance. I'm always telling people, I feel like sometimes, and this is not everyone, I'm not putting everyone in the box, but in some cases I find that people invest obviously in security or branding and marketing and getting to market as soon as possible, but compliance sometimes just gets buried down at the bottom. So if you do whatever you can to keep compliance at the top of your list, and investing in compliance means you're investing in your business. So on our next slide, we're going to be doing tips for creating a culture of compliance. So here are some of the tips that I find that are really helpful no matter what type of facility you're operating. Weekly team meetings with all level employees, weekly meetings with all upper management. And you should definitely always have a separate meeting for managers so you can actually talk about manager type things, and that making sure that the managers are hitting whatever goals they need to be hitting. But you should be setting goals for your employees. I worked in a lot of facilities. There was never any goals for me to reach as an employee. If you think about this, if you give your employees goals, you're not going to have a loss of it. You're going to have more retention with your employees. Employees want to feel like they're going somewhere, like they have somewhere to grow into. They want movement. They just don't want to be stagnant and be a $12 an hour bud tender or a $10 an hour trimmer for the rest of their lives. So you want to make sure you have really good goals to set for the employees. Quarterly SOP training for employees. I think employees should be, even if it's not required by law, and in some states it is. I think Maryland employees have to be trained on standard operating procedures on a quarterly basis. If you're having a lot of employees come in, you should just have quarterly trainings with all new and current employees on every SOP, and make sure you do an assessment, and if they sign, they understand, you have mitigating factors that all these employees have basically, they understand the standard operating procedures, they understand the role of their job, and you do this on a quarterly basis. This is another way to contribute to a compliance culture in your facility. Also, covering all new rule changes and monthly compliance meetings. Some states are slower, I understand, but like here in Colorado, it is nonstop with regulation. It is constantly labeling and packaging. It feels like every 6 months we're implementing a new packaging rule, and now, come January, the intended use statement's going to change again when we just got used to it flipping over this past regulation change. And so it's really important to keep track of all new regulation changes, and that's including reading the red line rules and making sure knowing what's coming in the future helps you be prepared and not so stuck in that suspended in the unknown and freaked out. Basically you want to encourage all your managers to get involved in regulation, such as working groups. Now, not all managers are going to actually get accepted to participate in a working group, and it doesn't even matter because at least here in Colorado, they are open to the public, and so those managers can attend those meetings just to get some education on what it looks like to have regulation created. I also say, attend a legislative session. Maybe, when the legislative session starts in your state, and they start here in January, maybe you do, a whole week where you rotate with employees because obviously your business has to keep running, but maybe they get to go, to the Capitol for the day and see how legislation works and see how regulation gets created so they can be in more and really understand what goes into running these businesses in a regulated market. I also highly recommend being involved in your community. And there's a lot of cannabis companies that do give back to the community and they do get involved. I just saw something online where a company was sponsoring a breakfast and allowing the community to come in with questions and ask questions about the cannabis industry. That's one way to give back to your community, but this also creates a culture. Even though it's creating it indirectly, it's not at your facility, your employees are participating in that. They see that you're giving back to your community. It's creating a really healthy culture in your facility. Be sure to include all low-level employees and educate them on compliance. And the reason I want to highlight this is because I was an employee myself and I see how the system works. Low-level employees, from the person who sweeps your floor and cleans your toilets and the trimmers and bud tenders, somebody who's not in a management position, they're not always given the information. They're not always trained properly. They're not always given the cannabis knowledge that they need. And the reason we don't want to leave them out because they are the gears that make your company run. Without employees, you would not have a business. So it's really important to highlight and make sure they're included in all levels of training. Also, so why do these things create a culture of compliance? Well, the way I look at it is this normalizes everything for employees working in a highly regulated market. I think it's important to normalize all these processes. If I worked in healthcare, regulation would just be absolutely normal to me. If I'm a nurse or I'm a doctor, I'm an ENT, or I work in manufacturing and I'm running the manufacturing floor and there's safety features, these are all things that are done on a daily basis in everyday life for people who work here in the United States. So I think it's important to normalize working in a regulated market because a lot of these people coming in have never worked in a regulated market. They maybe don't come from healthcare, and maybe they're just, somebody in college saying, hey, I want to get into the cannabis industry. I have no idea what I'm doing, and there's a lot of green people out there. So I think it's really important to normalize regulation with your employees. So our next slide is going to be what it means to lean into your processes. So what does it mean to lean in? Well, to me, leaning in is really using that structure as a way to support you. It's not saying, oh, we have SOPs and a compliance binder, and we have an employee handbook, and you put them on the shelf and they collect dust and no one touches them for a year. I've wiped off some pretty dusty binders in my days where I open it up and you can tell it's outdated. You can tell no one's even opening it. It's got cobwebs in it. How can you lean into your processes when you're not even acknowledging they exist? So, leaning into your processes, the first start is to say, hey, here are these processes. How are we being engaged with them? On a daily or weekly basis as a company? Are we just putting them on the shelf and forgetting about it, and employees are like, hey, I know what I'm doing, and then no one touches them? Or are you actually engaged in these processes that you spent all the time and money building to have for your business? You don't just have them to make you look good as a business. You should be engaged with them. Do you have processes in place? If not, you should start today. Begin building them. All businesses need processes, and I refer to processes as structure to thrive. More than ever, it is important to lean into your standard operating procedures, how you communicate with your staff, and management systems. This also creates a culture of compliance. I wanted to bring up, for any of you listening, I'm not sure how many people listening are from the manufacturing world, and I'm not really from the manufacturing world. I come from the restaurant industry and more on health and sanitation side of things, but I've been really studying the ISO 9001 management systems, and I found them to be really fascinating, and I know there's some production facilities like edible companies, topicals, and concentrate facilities that are actually taking the ISO 9001 certification program, which I think is I highly recommend it. You're basically a manufacturing facility. You're manufacturing items that are going to be going to the public. When I was looking up information on them, I found these core principles, and they really resonated with me. And I feel that they could resonate with any licensed facility. You can even be a dispensary. You don't have to be in manufacturing. I really think these principles can be applied to any cannabis business. And the first one is going to be involve your people. Once again, we have employees at the top. It's not customers first, it's employees first. I know we've all been taught customers first, but how are you going to put your customers first if your employees aren't first? Because they're the ones that are going to put your customers first. So it starts with your employees. They're going to be the ones that are going to take care of your customers. So you want to make sure that you take care of your employees. You want to involve your people. Second is focus on your customer. Well, now that you've got this incredible team, they're helping you focus on your customer. Third is you want to develop strong leadership. Fourth, you want to create a process of culture, and that's what this whole webcast is about, is how to create a culture of compliance, and that's a great management system. You want to adopt a system approach to management. Well, what kind of management systems do you have in place in your facility? Do you have anything? What kind of managers are you hiring? Are you just saying, hey, you were a bud tender, and now I'm going to make you a manager? And I know that sometimes that's how it happens. I never managed a business. I was a manager in the restaurant industry and catering, and I got lucky and I became a manager, at running dispensaries. But not everybody is meant to be a manager. Just like there's leaders and there's followers. Some people are really good at leading, and other people are okay with following, and that's okay. And I lost my page. Oh, yeah, create a process culture. Okay, so the next one is embrace continual improvement. So don't ever think you're there. The moment that you think you're there in your business, it's going to bite you in the butt. There's always an opportunity to improve in a business. Like I said, some of the most amazing business owners in the world, they use business coaches, or they have someone come in and they challenge their processes, or they audit their processes. Don't be afraid to have someone come into your business or your facility and say, hey, come in and assess our company and see where we're at. There's always room for improvement. There's a lot of people who depend on customer feedback. There's huge companies out here in the United States that want feedback from their customers so they can improve to be better. No one thinks they're there, so it's always important to embrace that. You want to base your decisions on facts. This is really important when it comes to compliance. I've run into issues where there's misinformation, where a manager has not been trained, or they've been misinformed, or they misinterpreted the rules. In a MIT facility, so a production facility that's possibly sending edibles or concentrates, they're manifesting that product over to this dispensary to sell on the shelf, and the manager rejects the package. And the manager rejects the package because she wasn't educated properly and she has misinformation. And so now you cost basically that company money, and then you cost the dispensary that company money because you rejected a package because an employee wasn't properly trained, because they didn't have facts. They didn't have the facts. They weren't trained on the actual compliance rules and what they meant and how to implement them. So it's really important to base your decisions on facts. So you want to develop mutually beneficial relationships with suppliers. I can't tell you how important this is. No matter what side you're on, if you're running a dispensary or owning a dispensary, you want to have good relationships with your vendors. And people who are the vendors, if you're an edible company or you're a cultivation facility and you're supplying dispensaries with cannabis or raw cannabis or any kind of packaged product, you don't want to burn your bridges. One thing I highly recommend is everyone pays their bills, and make sure you establish if you're a net 15, a net 30 company. Some edible companies are net today because they have been burned so many times and not been paid. Think about this. I know some of you might know about the Sweet Leaf dispensaries getting shut down here in Colorado. They lost 26 licenses. Imagine how many people did not get paid, how many vendors did not get paid because that product got held up in an investigation. So you want to think about these things. I always highly recommend, unless you really have a good working relationship with that vendor and they're always on time, I'd really recommend having a very strict payment policy. And like I said, build relationships. You want to build relationships with the people that you're working with. So on our next slide, we're going to talk about keeping up with regulation. I know this can be an extremely daunting task for some people, but honestly, what I always like to tell everyone is don't try to eat the whole elephant in the room at once. Just start, chipping away out of it, a little piece at a time, and that will help with overwhelm. So one of the tips I like to give on keeping up with regulations is sign up with all local, state, and email bulletins. For example, like OSHA, the health department, the fire department, the city and county, and the state. So the examples of state would be the MED, which is in Colorado, LARA, for example, that's Michigan, or the MMCC, which is in Maryland, the commission. So if you're on these state sites, I would highly recommend going through them and see if they have any kind of email sign up, because this way you're not searching for the information on a daily basis. They're actually sending it to you, and you don't have to worry about it. It's going to show up in your email box. I highly recommend that everyone get involved in OSHA. They obviously aren't going to come to your facility unless there's an issue. So 2 ways OSHA can come to your facility is if an employee calls and files a complaint, a legitimate complaint, or you have a disgruntled employee that calls every single state agency on you and reports you because they're pissed off because they lost their job. And both those things can happen. And obviously, if somebody dies and gets severely injured at your facility, OSHA will come in. But just because you don't think those things are going to happen doesn't mean you should not be prepared. Be prepared for OSHA. Be ready for the health department. I recommend if you are a facility where you're touching products such as a production facility like concentrates and edibles, get all your employees served safe. Even if it's not required in cannabis regulation, getting served safe, I think, is really, really important certification. When I work in the restaurant industry, I always had to get mine and make sure I had my card on me. It just teaches basics, health and sanitation principles for employees. I think it's a really good thing to do, and that creates a culture of compliance in your facility as well. I don't know if your state, as a fire department, and what town you're in will have things. I know at least for Denver, you can go on their website and they actually have information for the marijuana industry. So it really depends on where your state is, how far along. We're lucky out here in Colorado. We've been at it for a while. Just like the city and county I mentioned, the city and county of Denver, they put out they're always putting out bulletins. I love getting their bulletins. They always have great information. So that is one way to keep up with regulations. So another way is attending working groups, what I mentioned earlier, the work group meetings, or sign up to be part of changing regulation. I really highly recommend that owners and managers get involved in this process. Like I mentioned before, you want to read all the red line rules and emergency rules so you know what's coming. Attend legislative sessions at the state level, have a full-time compliance officers. I know in the smaller businesses it's harder, so the manager wears a ton of hats. They're the compliance officer, they're the metric person, they're doing all the ordering, the scheduling, they're managing the employees. They're in charge of all the money in the store. They're locking up the store. They're opening the store. So managers can wear a lot of hats. But if you have it in your budget, I definitely recommend that you bring on a full-time compliance officer. And if you can't, you can utilize a compliance company like somebody like me. I'm cheaper than an employee because I wouldn't be there every day. You wouldn't have to be paying me to be there every day. I would just come in on a quarterly basis, which is way lower than what you pay an employee for a whole entire year. Also, utilize your cannabis law firm. A lot of people don't want to utilize, they don't want to see that retainer go down. They're so scared to take money out of that retainer with their lawyer. Well, you have a lawyer for a reason. Don't, use your lawyers. I mean, that's why you just don't have them for when you're in trouble. You utilize them. Ask them a question. It might not cost as much as you think. So don't be afraid to utilize your lawyers. And then once again, quarterly and yearly third-party audits. I don't care if you're just at the beginning or you're a well-rooted company. I have well-rooted companies that use me on a quarterly basis. Even though I find nothing wrong for them, it's keeping the compliance culture going. It's saying, well, something could happen in 3 months, Jenny, so we're always going to have you come in every 3 months. Even though the last couple quarters you haven't found anything, you never know what's going to happen. You never know, because every quarter you get new employees. So I have people that have me come in and train their employees every quarter. Every 6 months I come in and I train them, or right when the new regulations come in January, I'll start doing a lot more employee trainings and getting them prepped and ready for the regulation things that switch over in January 2019. So all these things are important for keeping up with regs. The next one I thought was kind of really important. I'm a big advocate for employees. I am with owners as well, but I like to, my passion is to really help employees thrive in this industry. And I want employers to find the best employees out there as well. So hiring the right employees, one of the things is you want to hire employees who have worked in regulated markets and already have the skill set to be engaged in compliance. And here's some examples. So you can hire someone who's worked in healthcare. You can hire anyone who's worked in manufacturing, whether they were a manager or they worked on the floor, it doesn't matter. You can hire people from the restaurant industry or hospitality industry. Remember, all these people, there's some type of rules and regulations that they have to follow. There's health and sanitation rules. And then when healthcare, we have healthcare regulation that you have to follow. And there's HIPAA. There's all these things that these guys are trained on a normal basis. Especially if I'm going to be running a manufacturing company and producing edibles or concentrates, I would absolutely go after somebody who's worked in the manufacturing industry because they're going to understand the GMPs, the good manufacturing practices, and the ISO 9001. They're already going to be used to those type of things that other employees might not be used to. So I think, to me, those guys are gems. They're like the diamonds in the rough of employees. Because I always tell people I can teach anyone cannabis. Cannabis is easy to teach. Somebody who's worked in a regulated market already for 23 years or they've worked hard for 23 years, that's a skill set you cannot teach in a couple weeks. I can teach anyone cannabis in 3 weeks. So that's why whenever I hired employees, I actually never really hired employees that were from the cannabis industry. I loved people who came in from other states, and I loved reading their resumes and looking for people that had really good, solid backgrounds. So to me, if that was my business, I would want those people as my core employees. You want to hire managers who have managing experience. I feel like back in the old days, when managers were managers, they were managers. Like, they actually had a lot of experience. I feel like nowadays, it's like we wave a magic wand and we say, hey, you're a manager, go manage. And then we don't train them and we don't teach them and we don't have anyone come in and help implement or help them obtain that skill set. So you want to make sure that you hire somebody that has managing experience. Like I said earlier, it's easier to train somebody on cannabis knowledge than it is. I would rather pick somebody with a way larger skill set and teach them cannabis knowledge. Also, you want to check employee references no matter what. I feel like this is 50-50. Half the people check references and half the people don't. I bring this up in every single webinar that I do, where or I'm helping, even if, vet your vendors, vet your employees, call references. Always get 3 references. Even if you're going to use a contractor, if you use somebody like me, a consultant, ask me for 3 references. I have no problem getting you 3 references. You should do the same. You should expect the same thing of your employees because they are the face of your company. They're the ones representing your business. They're the ones talking to your customers. You want to make sure that you're hiring the right people. And the reason that we check references is because we want subordinates. We don't want somebody who's insubordinate on our team. We want somebody who can follow structure, who can listen to managers. Those are the type of people you want to hire. So a couple more tips on employees. You want to pick employees who are driven. You want to pick employees who are career and goal-oriented. I know it's hard if people just want to hire an employee and they want them there forever, but you want somebody that wants a career, that they want to move up. You don't want an unhappy employee who's stuck there at $12 an hour and not happy and miserable. So try and pick people who are career and goal-oriented. You want to make sure you're picking hard workers. You can easily see if they work hard on their resume. You can see how much effort they put into their resume, how articulate they are on their resume. Did they give you a cover letter? Did they not give you a cover letter? That's how you tell how much of an employee actually wants to be in there. You can really tell a lot by looking at someone's resume. Hungry for knowledge. This is also information that you can see on their resume. What do they have on their resume? What kind of activities they're involved in? Are they involved in the community? Are they involved in normal? Do they go to NCIA meetings? Are they trying everything they can to learn everything about cannabis? Or just even any other activities outside the cannabis industry? It doesn't really matter. Like I did Toastmasters for a while. I did that for 2 years, working on practicing speeches, helping me to be a better communicator and speaker. That's not cannabis related. That's just self-improvement related. So you want to look for those things on somebody's resume. You want doers and not complainers. We don't like complainers. Sometimes I felt like I was running romper room at some of these facilities and I was really a babysitter. You don't want to get stuck in a position where now you're a babysitter for your employees, and that's also a lack of structure. So you want to make sure you hire doers and not complainers. I'm always saying hire leaders. You don't want to just hire a bunch of people that follow. Of course you want people who follow because we need subordinates, but if you're going to hire a manager, you got to hire a manager that's a leader. And a leader is not somebody who talks at employees. Talking at employees is not being a leader. A leader is somebody who rolls up their sleeves and said, I can sit right here with you and clean the toilet. Like, I'm no different than you. I have no problem doing all the things that I'm asking you to do. And it's having compassion for your employees. It's using the sandwich effect. It's complimenting them and then pointing out what they're not doing correctly and then complimenting them again. It's just not barking orders at employees. That just shuts them down. So hire leaders that are capable of doing that. Hire managers who are excited to be a manager and want to really manage employees. And my last statement for this slide presentation is just don't be shy on building the right team for your business. This is your business. Don't cave in and not give yourself what you need or want for your business. Really make sure that you build the team that you want so you can be successful in your cannabis business, whatever type of licensed facility that you might be operating or whatever type of cannabis business. Even if you're an ancillary business like me, I would apply all these things that I shared with you in my own consulting business for hiring an employee or how I'm going to run my business. Whatever I'm asking you to do and how to approach this, I expect these same things as myself as a business owner. So I really hope this information was useful and helped you guys today.
100%. You're striking a chord on every one of these slides. I'm sure most of these folks that are tuned in are operators, owners, maybe even employees, and I'm sure that they understand when you talk about some of these slides, you've made some points that they've nodded their head and agreed with you. And, I can tell you right now, I'm living and breathing in this space, and we're constantly, building facilities and looking to hire and train. And we come across a lot of these owners sometimes who empower us as consultants to come and do a job, but they want to hire someone immediately that they met from a friend, and then so I ask for references, and well no, I don't need to call any references, and it's like, well, you just spent $10 million on this gigantic facility, and you don't want to check on these people, and it really, makes you stop and think. You got to kind of shake these people and say, hey, pull your head out of your butt here, and let's get back to reality and treat this like the investment that you put into this, and really invest now, not just that financial bit that you did that was a lot of money. Take that same energy and effort into hiring everybody.
I agree.
I look at when you hire from the ground up, or even anybody that you're replacing, I'm trying to create an all-star team. I want the best person to do. If it's the one that's scrubbing pots, I want them to be the best pot scrubber that I know. I want them to have the ambition knowing that they can move up the ladder. And so you've really got to go out there and put that effort and energy into sorting through resumes. Yeah, these guys may be $12, $13, $14 an hour employees, but this is the backbone of your business. And without these folks, you are going to have a hard time struggling. And so we see this quite a bit in here. And, you hit so many points on all these slides. I made a ton of notes here. I was scribbling away here for my own use because it's brilliant. I appreciate the free information.
You're welcome.
It's awesome, and I hope our audience really took notes as well, because there's some great stuff here that is easily overlooked. And all of you, I'm sure, like I said, nodded your head with a lot of points are being made here, but what are you going to do about it to address these things, to create that culture? That's the thing. Are you going to be proactive, or are you going to continue to slack and let your business not be as successful as it could be?
Yeah, and I think for me it's really helpful because I was an employee, and I transitioned from being an employee to an owner, and I was a manager, and all these things I shared are things that I saw with my own eyes while I was in the trenches of these licensed facilities, and I know they're not being addressed, and that's why I thought it was really important to bring it up today.
100%. Well, let's go to the audience here. I've got a couple coming in here. One, I've read it. Maybe you can help me interpret it better, so let's give it a shot here.
Okay.
He says, would you suggest facilitating a company wiki? I've been a realtor the last 7 years, and I've been doing a lot of reading on inbound organizations. And I had to look up what was a company wiki. That was we're kind of torn from that. We're not sure how to answer this question. I'm going to give it the old college stab and help us kind of understand. Maybe a company wiki is maybe some type of app or web-based platform that is being utilized to share information, to keep, regulation changes in a place where everyone can access. Company SOPs are in a place getting access. Is there
so something kind of like Complia. Have you heard of Complia?
I haven't, but maybe that's what he's going for. I apologize that we can't answer this directly.
I think I kind of understand a little bit, and you can always email me, or we can jump on a phone call. I'm not sure if they're going to give my email out after this webcast, and I can always say it at the end. But out here, there's a platform called Complia, COMPLIA. And they help organize when your licenses are going to expire. It can hold your SOPs. It tells you when your employee badges are going to expire. It also hosts a bunch of logs and forms. The employees can get signed in and communicate and create tasks. It's kind of somewhat similar to like Podio, but for cannabis compliance. For anyone that uses a platform called Podio, there's a bunch of platforms out there that help where managers or employees are assigned tasks, but the Complia platform helps manage all the compliance at a whole, so everyone's connected. I hope that's helpful. And for anyone that I'm not able to answer questions, I'm going to have to do research, you can email me at Jenny with a Y at icsconsultingservice.com, and I would be more than happy to answer questions that I might not be able to answer today, because that's the first time I've heard that term. So
cool. Here's another question from a good friend of mine. She says, would you argue spending more money on labor to be able to hire more professionals in this industry, ? For most companies, it's a matter of labor costs for professionals versus cheaper labor for a less professional background.
It just depends. For managers, absolutely go all the way with them because they're the captain of the ship. Because obviously, if you're an owner, you're working on the business. You're not working in the business. and the manager is working in the business. So I would definitely make sure you put aside enough money to hire a manager. For employees, there is a way where you're interviewing employees that you can look for employees that are highly coachable and really trainable, and you can tell that they have a lot of opportunity to grow, and you can pay them a lower rate, and when it's time, you can move them up to the next position. But I know it's the same thing in the restaurant industry. Cooks, we all make lower money, and the head chef and the sous chef. The head chef sits in the office and does all the ordering, and the sous chef is the one working his or her butt off the whole time, managing all the employees. So when it comes to higher up, obviously you want to pay those guys more. Honestly, I do know budtenders that make $18 an hour, and I know some companies that give their budtenders health insurance. Let's just say, hey, I got to go at a lower rate, then give your employees health insurance. If you're going to pay them, $12, $13 an hour, give them health insurance, let them put out a tip jar, just like Starbucks, let them get signed up in some stocks in the company or stuff like that. There's ways to reward low-level employees, not 501k, but maybe a mutual fund. Maybe, you put in 1% on their paycheck and they put in another percentage for a mutual fund, or just there's got to be a way to help them where you're not spending a ton of money on labor, but definitely make sure you invest some money in your managers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Here's another question. We have a gentleman here. He's mentioning that he's a grower for a facility here in Colorado and transitioning into the California market.
Oh, cool.
He wanted to know if we had any resources for learning about new laws and regulations in California. And I would just say just go to the state website first and foremost, and that's going to be your best directory and guidance from there. And then get tapped into some other industry resources. There's a lot of great emailers that I'm tapped into from MJ Biz. Daily gets out a great newsletter. Word on the Tree is another one. And there's probably a handful of other ones that I'm not going to mention here, but there's quite a few that will really help you get lined up, not only just in California, but also for other markets, but can help give you that guidance and stuff.
Yeah. And also, too, when you get out to California, there's some amazing meetups in California. There's a lot of good actually groups on Facebook that are California-based, and also there's a couple events coming up in California for NCIA. If you can get out there to a couple of the NCIA events that are going out in California this year. But when you get out there, get signed up for those meetup groups. You don't know who you're going to meet at those meetup groups. You could meet all kinds of people. And California, they have a lot of really amazing networking groups. And to the grower here in Colorado, like I said, email me. When I get home, I could definitely do some research, and maybe I can find you a connection in California that can help you for what you asked for your question.
All right, we've just got a couple I want to just say. Some said valuable stuff. Another one said, thank you very much. The other one says, great points and well presented. So just appreciate the comments from everyone.
Thank you.
I've got another one here that's asking, how do you see HIPAA in the industry, and when do you think it will be a standard thing? I think that's really around the medical side specifically. That's
medical, yeah. There's not really any HIPAA regulation that's happening on the adult use side of the market, well, especially in Colorado, where regulate like alcohol. So basically, all we can do is check an ID out here. On the medical side out here, HIPAA's not coming into our facility, but we have to use HIPAA standards. You can't, even with employee information, like if you have an employee file open on your desk, that's a no-no. It should not be open. Their information should always be flipped over. You should never have I-9s mixed in with an employee's file. The same thing with doctor recommendations for a patient. That information should never be laying on your desk where other employees can walk by. You should never take patient records home. So there's a lot of things that we utilize here in Colorado that we have to follow for HIPAA. I think, if things ever become on a federal level, and I'm not sure where it's going to go federally, I think things could change and we could have HIPAA for everyone. I'm just not sure where it's going to go. It's so unknown for us right now. If it's going to be federally decriminalized or if it's going to be put down to a lower class as far as being a scheduled drug. None of us really know where that's heading. So HIPAA could happen in a different way than what it's happening right now on the medical side, but that's just kind of an unknown space right now.
Could you please give your email one more time? I think someone had an issue getting that.
Yeah, so it's Jenny, Jenny, at C for consulting, S for solutions, ICS consultingservice.com.
Okay.
I even confused myself.
and then what is your web address?
Oh, my web address is going to be www.ICS, S is in solutions, I'm not saying the F word, S like solutions, consultingservice.com. You can go to my website, and I have a contact form. You can reach out to me through my contact form as well. I have my phone number on there and an email.
Okay. Well, this was a wealth of knowledge today, especially for me, because I scribbled on every single page that I had here. I've got a lot of notes, just like for my own personal stuff. A lot of this stuff is basic common sense, but it's amazing how much we overlook this shit.
Yeah.
Excuse my language.
No, it's okay.
And, it's great that, having these processes in place, creating this culture, it's a multi-pronged approach.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just one way. You have to look at it from who you're hiring, from what type of processes and procedures you have in place, how you're managing expectations from everybody.
Correct.
It's a lot that goes into it. And when done properly and executed properly, you can make your business very successful and be competitive. And it's not rocket science. It's just a matter of having process. And you hit some really strong points on hiring folks that come from other regulated markets. I think this is very important for people to realize that because they're used to standard culture in general of compliance and regulation and what to follow, and so they will follow in suit with this. And so, I'm actually walking into a grow facility today for the first day to take over management of it, and it's an uphill battle knowing that I've got a lot of process and procedure to get into place. For me, the first week, I'm going there to look, listen, and learn. And sit there, and just observe and absorb and take in information and try to understand the rhyme or reason and the madness and try to put, a structure to it. So. And
that's really, you're basically assessing their compliance culture.
Pretty much.
You're really going to assess how employees interact with each other, how they interact with managers, how, are they getting their daily tasks completed? Are they following the rules and regulations? Is there, banter? Are people focused, Those are all things you can look for, and it's kind of like, employees are so used to being on camera that they just forget and they relax and they forget they're being watched. So I'm sure when you go in there, they're going to forget they're going to be being watched and they're going to expose themselves.
That's it. For me, I go in there and I get dirty with them. I want to work side by side. I want to know every process so that we can figure out how to improve them if they can be.
Exactly.
So I'll become a therapist, we'll call it,
I love it. You're a cannabis therapist. I feel like I'm a cannabis, life coach.
Seriously. I guess it's true. Well, I'm going to wrap this up today. I really appreciate you coming in today. I want to thank you for coming in. ICS Consulting, Industry Compliance Solutions. Special guest, Jenny Hermano. One more time, I'll give you a chance to give your web address and your email one more time.
Okay. And it's actually Jenny Germano.
Sorry, I apologize. I'm butchering your name.
No,
Sorry.
It's okay. Well, in Spanish, the G's an H, so I literally understand, and I've had people call me Hermano, but so it's a hard G, so Jenny Germano, and my website is www.icsconsultingservice.com. You can also email me at jenny@icsconsultingservice.com. I have a business Facebook page. You should definitely go on there and like it. I post a lot of stuff about compliance tips and regulations. You can follow me on Instagram. I have a really fun Instagram page. And, you can check me out on LinkedIn. I'm also on LinkedIn. So however you want to contact me, I'm open to that.
Great. This will be up online, and give us just about a week or so. We get these up online, so you'll have access to listen to this over and over again if you'd like.
And will you guys link my website on that?
We will,
okay,
100%.
So they'll be able to get to my website, too.
100%.
Fantastic.
So, Once again, I want to thank you for coming in. This is Creating a Culture of Compliance. I am Ellis Smith. I'm your host. We want to thank Cannabis Tech for hosting us. Until next time, audience, have a great day. Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.
Thank you.